Good morning, everyone. I'm Anusha Deshpande. I'm assistant professor in the EC department. I'm from Guru Nanak Institute of Technology. Today, I'm going to explain about the Raspberry Pi. Right. So nowadays, so many are using the Raspberry Pi instead of using this microprocessor and the microcontroller. So why we are going with the Raspberry Pi? Why not we are going with the processor and the controller? Means it is very less cost and it is very small in size also, and it is very efficient in working also. That's why we are preferring the Raspberry Pi. We can say that this Raspberry Pi is acting as like a mini computer. It is just like a credit card size there, and it is also known to be as a single chip microcomputer there, or else we can say that it is a series of small board computer. Yeah. So now we'll discuss about this Raspberry Pi. So in this Raspberry Pi, we need to know about in which language this program will perform. Means in the case of the Raspberry Pi, it takes a program in terms of the Python. So not only the Raspberry Pi, we are having the many other boards and many other softwares just like the Raspberry Pi, Arduino and the Node MCU. In the case of the Raspberry Pi, we'll write the programming in terms of the Python, and in case of the Arduino, we'll write the programming in terms of C or C++. In the Node MCU also, we wrote in the terms of the C or C++. Now we'll see what the Raspberry Pi is generally consist of. So the Raspberry Pi is having some hardware components. As we see the Raspberry Pi board, in that the hardware components will be appeared there. So what generally the Raspberry Pi is consist of means the first thing is that it consists of the hardware component of the HDMI. So what is this HDMI means? This HDMI is nothing but the high definition multimedia interface. So why we require this HDMI means so as to connect the GPIO pins to any monitor or any television, we require the HDMI cable there. So for that just we are seeing it as a one of the hardware component of the Raspberry Pi. And next hardware component of the Raspberry Pi is a camera serial interface. So as to connect the camera to the Raspberry Pi, just we are doing the interfacing with that. So this is one of the most important component of the Raspberry Pi. And the next hardware component of the Raspberry Pi is a DSI, display serial interface. So why we require this display serial interface means so as to display anything, either it was a humidity or temperature, so we require some display there. So far here we are using the LCD display. So when we say it as a interfacing means whenever we are connecting GPIO pins to the LCD display, so far we can say that it is acting as like a display serial interface. And next the hardware component of the Raspberry Pi is a power LED. So what this power LED means, so as to run the Raspberry Pi, it requires some operating voltage. So what the operating voltage to require for the Raspberry Pi means, it required the operating voltage of from 4.5 volts to the 5 volts. So whenever we are giving the 4.5 volts to the 5 volts to Raspberry Pi, therefore some LED will blink there. That LED is in terms of the green color. So the LED will show the identification that the Raspberry Pi is getting the required operating voltage there. And the next thing is that the act power. So what is meant by this act power means this act power indicates the activity of the SD card. So already we know about the SD card. SD card is nothing but the storage devices. So in the case of the Raspberry Pi, no need to install specially the OS in that. So we have the SD card. In that SD card only we have to install the OS, and we can install the programs which we are going to perform there, and whatever the libraries which are required, that libraries or also we have installed in the SD card only. So these SD card storage devices were storing all the OS and libraries and programs whichever we required there. So there is no special installation again for the Raspberry Pi. These are the 5 most important hardware components of the Raspberry Pi. Now, for writing the program in the Raspberry Pi, we are writing in terms of the Python, right? So what the Python programming required? So what is meant by the variable and what is meant by the data type and what operations we are doing in terms of the Python programming, we'll see that one. So in the case of the Python programming, first of all, we'll see what is meant by the variable. Generally, we know about the variable. Variable means it was storing some amount of the data or it was storing some amount of the element. So whatever the variables, we are giving the variables in terms of A, B, C, D, right? So now the A is storing the value of the 10. So it was storing the value of the 10. So it was storing in terms of the variable A. Simply we can say that this variable is acting as like a container. It was containing the value of the 10 and that is the data of the A variable, right? Similarly for the other variables also. So now to store the data, now we are taking the variable. So to store the different types of the data, we require different types of the data types. So what generally the data types are there in the Python? So for suppose you can take the example that, so we are going to some shop, and in that shop we are buying many things there, just like the grains and oil and the soaps. So as to store the oil, we require a particular container. So as to store the soaps, we have to require a particular container. And as per the grains also, we require a particular container. Here also to store the data, we require a particular data types which to store the data. So what generally the data types are there means, first one is a text, right? In the case of the data type text, we want the data type is a string that we are writing in terms of the str. Already we know about the string. If you want to display anything, we require the string only. So for suppose if you want to display hello world at the output, so this hello world is nothing but the string to us. So how will display this one? Just we have to write it as print hello world. This hello world is nothing but a string, that one. This text we are assuming it as like a string, and this string has to display at the output, this one. This is one of the data type to display any text in the form of the string. So what the data type we are using here means str. This str is nothing but the string. And now one more data type it is there, that is a numeric. In the case of the numeric, we have the different types, again the integer, float and the complex. So already we know about the integer. Integer means it was storing the value of A that is equal to 10. So whenever we are giving the values in terms of the decimals, either in terms of zeros or 10 or 110, that has to be stored in terms that what we have to take here means to store the data, that is a int we have to take there. What data type we have to store? This 10 decimal data means we have to take this integer. And to store the data in terms of pi. Pi means the value is equal to 3.14. I want to store the data in terms of the 3.14 form. So what data type I have to take means I have to go with the float there. So how to write the output? So how to program, how to display that at the output means, see here, I am writing down. Now see here, I am taking here A is equal to 3.14 and I am writing here type A, or else we can write in terms of type float. If we are writing in this way, whatever the integer we have given there, that will be displayed at the output. So simply we can say that the float has to be written in the form of the pi model. So already you know about the complex. Complex is consisting of both the real and the imaginary there. So suppose we are taking in the terms of 2 plus imaginary part of the 4. This 2 is nothing but the real part and this 4 is nothing but the imaginary part. So how to display the output for the complex means, see, similarly same like this only. We can take here A is equal to 2 plus imaginary of 4 and we have to write it as a type A. Whatever the data which was there in the type A, that will be displayed at the output. So far to display the numbers in terms of the decimals or in terms of the float or in terms of the complex, we have to use the data type as a numeric there. Yeah. After the numeric, we will go with the another data type, that is a sequence, right? So why we are going with this sequence data type means, suppose if you are indicating any numbers there, or suppose if you are indicating any variables there, that numbers or should be some particular order. So to follow that particular order, we are going with the form of the sequence. So what the sequence data type is consist of means, see here, it consists of the list, range and the tuple. Right? The data type of the sequence is consist of list, range and the tuple. So whenever you are writing the program in terms of the Python, see here, whenever we are writing the numbers in terms of the list, we have to use a square brackets there. And for the tuple, we have to use a open brackets there. For suppose if you take the list is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. So it was following some sequence there. So that sequence we are giving in terms of the list there. So in the case of the list, whether the order was changed also, the list will accept the data. So even though if you want to include one more number in the list, it will also accept the data which we are including that one. In the case of the tuple, even though the order was changed, it will accept the data. But in the case of the tuple, if you want to include any more number to the tuple, it won't accept the whatever the number we are going to place there additionally. That means in the simple form we can say that the list will accept the order if it was changing. The tuple will also accept the order even though the order was changing. But if you want to include one more element to the list will accept. In the case of the tuple, if you want to add one more number to the tuple, it won't accept the one more element to add it suddenly to the program, right? So that is the thing of the sequence. And nextly, the Boolean. So this Boolean we will using as a bull there. So generally where this Boolean instruction will use means, see here, I am taking the two variables A and the B and I am giving the A value as a 3 and B value as a 4. So I want to do the comparison in between the A and the B. So generally how we'll do the comparison in between the two variables? The comparison in between the two variables can be done in the two forms. Either it was A is greater than B or A is less than B or A is equal to B. So in the case of we don't know the values of A and B, so in that case, so we have to use a Boolean function whether it was A is greater than B or A is less than B or A is equal to B. So that means we don't know the true value. That means whether A is greater than B is true or A is less than B is true or false or A is equal to B is true or false. So generally the Boolean functions are mainly used in the while loops. So in the case of while loops, we will use this Boolean functions, right? So this is the next one. And last one is a set. For this set, we are using the set only. The set also will comes under the sequence only. We are writing in terms of this flower brackets. Whenever we want to indicate in terms of numbers or whenever we want to indicate in terms of the alphabets, just we can take the set also. In this set also we can take in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4. So whenever you are writing the numbers in terms of list or in terms of the tuple, so I want to display that list or that numbers in the output. So how I need to write that one means, see here, I have to write in this way: list equal to A, comma B, comma C. Now I want to print this list. So directly I am writing here print list. Whatever the list we have given, so the list is consisting of the alphabets. All that alphabets will be displayed at the output. So why we are giving to display means, see here I have written here as a print here. So whenever we are giving the print here, so whatever the things I have written in this single quotation, that will be displayed at the output.